My name is Daniel Reed. I used to do night shift delivery driving for a subcontract logistics company in the US. Mostly rural routes, small towns, hospitals, warehouses, that kind of thing. Nothing unusual on paper. I worked mostly in the Midwest, and sometimes stretched into Wyoming and Nebraska, depending on assignments. Night shifts were normal for me. Quiet roads, long stretches of highway, no real interaction with people. Just driving and listening to the engine. Most nights were boring, that's the truth. But there were a few nights I still can't fully explain. The first one happened on a route between Nebraska and South Dakota. INTERSTATE 90 was part of it. Long straight highway, very little traffic at night. I remember picking up the truck like usual, preloaded cargo, paperwork already printed, GPS already set by dispatch. Nothing felt off at the beginning, but around maybe an hour into the drive, I noticed something small. First, the radio wasn't on, but I kept hearing faint static anyway, like something was trying to come through. I ignored it at first, then it got louder. Not music, not a station, just static bursts, like someone trying to speak through interference. I remember checking the radio panel to see if it was even turned on. It wasn't. That's when it stopped for a moment, and then a voice came through. Very clear. No delay. It said, "Maintain route speed." I actually remember laughing a little, because I thought maybe dispatch had installed some kind of monitoring system I wasn't told about. But I still checked the dashboard. No active call. No Bluetooth. No connected device. Nothing. That made me slightly uncomfortable, but I kept driving. About 40 to 50 miles later, I noticed something on the roadside. A delivery truck parked on the shoulder. Hazard lights on. At first, I assumed it was just another driver taking a break or dealing with an issue. But as I passed it, I slowed down slightly, and I looked inside. There was a driver sitting there, not moving much. Just sitting straight. Not looking around. Not checking anything. Just staring forward. I don't know why, but something about that felt off. I can't explain it properly. He didn't look injured or asleep. He just looked like he was waiting for something that wasn't coming. I kept driving. Then my radio turned on again. Same static first, then the voice. But this time, it said something different. "You're on schedule." That line stuck with me for some reason, because I hadn't told anyone my exact timing, and I definitely hadn't checked if I was on schedule for anything. That was the first night I started paying more attention than usual. I didn't report anything when I reached the drop point. I told myself it was just radio interference or fatigue from long driving hours. But deep down, I remember feeling like something had acknowledged me on that road, and that I wasn't just driving through it normally. I was being noticed. After that first night, I honestly tried not to think too much about it. Because when you work night shifts long enough, you start questioning your own perception sometimes. You get tired. Your brain plays tricks. That's what I told myself. But the next assignment made it harder to ignore. Same general route again. Interstate stretch. Nebraska, into Wyoming side. Another long delivery run. I remember asking dispatch if I was being assigned the same corridor again, and they just said, "That's the route available." No explanation beyond that. So I took it. First hour felt normal again. Highway was empty, like always at that time of night. Just my headlights and the road disappearing into darkness. But I noticed something small early on. The radio wasn't fully off this time. There was a faint sound, like low static under everything. Not loud, just barely there. Like when a signal isn't fully tuned. I tried switching it off completely, but it didn't make a difference. It stayed. That's when I started feeling uneasy again. A little later, I passed a rest area that I clearly remembered from previous drives, but something about it looked different. Not physically different, but empty in a way it shouldn't have been. No lights, no movement. Not even the usual parked cars you sometimes see at night. Just total stillness. I kept driving. Around maybe halfway through the route, I saw another truck ahead of me. Same type of delivery truck. But this one was moving unusually slow in the same lane. I naturally assumed I would just pass it, but as I got closer, it started matching my speed. Exactly, I slowed down a little. It slowed down too. I sped up slightly. it did the same. That's when I started paying full attention, because that's not normal highway behavior. Trucks don't mirror speed like that without reason. I remember checking my mirrors constantly at that point, trying to see if anything else was around us, but there was nothing, just me and that truck ahead. Then something strange happened. The truck slowly drifted into the left lane, letting me come closer. And as I got alongside it, I could see the driver clearly. He was wearing the same uniform as me, same company logo. But what made me pause was that he didn't look at me, not even once. He just kept staring forward like I wasn't there. That gave me a strange feeling I can't fully explain. Not fear exactly, more like being ignored in a way that felt intentional. I drove past him slowly, and as I did, the radio made a sound again. Static first, then a voice. Same voice as before. It said, "You're both aligned." I remember actually saying out loud, "What does that mean?" But there was no response after that. The truck behind me disappeared from my mirror a few seconds later. Not like it turned off or slowed down. Just not there anymore. I checked again a few times, thinking maybe I lost it in blind spots or distance, but there was nothing. That's when I started feeling real discomfort, because I could explain the first night as coincidence, but this was repeating in a way that didn't feel accidental anymore. It felt like the road itself was behaving differently when I was on it. When I reached the delivery point that night, I didn't mention anything to dispatch. I just signed off and left. But I remember sitting in my truck for a long time before driving away, just trying to decide if I was imagining patterns that weren't actually there, or if something about those night routes wasn't normal at all. After that second night, I started noticing something I didn't feel comfortable talking about at first. It wasn't just what I saw anymore. It was what I couldn't properly account for. There were gaps in time, small ones at first. Like I would check the dashboard, look back at the road, and feel like a few seconds had passed without me fully registering them. At the beginning, I thought it was just fatigue again. Night driving does that sometimes. You zone out without realizing it, but it started happening more often. On one shift, I remember clearly passing a fuel station sign. I looked at it because I was planning to stop there. The next thing I remember, I was already several miles past it, no memory of passing it. Just suddenly realizing it wasn't in my rearview mirror anymore. That's the first time I actually felt something was off, in a way I couldn't explain logically. Not scary yet, just missing pieces. Then came the third incident. This is the one I still don't like thinking about. I was driving the same general corridor again, Interstate 90 stretch. Night shift like always. Everything felt normal at the start, but somewhere around mid-route, I noticed I wasn't seeing other vehicles at all. That was strange because even at night, you usually pass at least a few trucks. That night, it was completely empty. Too empty. Then I saw headlights ahead, a truck, same company type again. But what caught my attention immediately was the way it was positioned. It wasn't moving like normal traffic. It was centered in my lane, coming directly toward me. At first, I thought maybe I was misreading the lanes, or drifting slightly. That happens when you're tired, so I slowed down. But it didn't slow down. It kept coming. And I remember feeling my body tense immediately, because that's not something you normally process calmly on a highway. I checked my mirrors quickly. There was nothing behind me, just darkness. When I looked forward again, the truck was closer, still centered, still coming straight at me. I remember saying out loud, "What the hell is this?" But there was no response from dispatch. No hajunaizi. Nothing, just silence in the cab. I slowed down even more, thinking maybe I was hallucinating or drifting into sleep without realizing it. But I was fully awake. I can still remember how sharp everything felt. The road lines, the engine sound, my breathing. The truck came close enough that I thought I was going to collide. And then something happened that I still can't explain properly. It passed me, not by swerving, not by correcting lanes. It just wasn't there when it should have impacted. Like the space between us never aligned. And as it passed, I caught a glimpse inside. For maybe half a second, there was a driver. Same uniform as mine, same posture. But he wasn't looking at the road. He was looking at me, directly, like he had been waiting for that exact moment. And I don't know why, but that stuck with me more than anything else, because it didn't feel like a random driver. It felt like someone who recognized me, or something that did. After it passed, I immediately checked my rearview mirror. Nothing. No truck. No headlights. Just empty highway behind me. And that's when I started getting confused about something even more basic. I checked my dashboard clock. I had lost nearly 20 minutes. No memory of that time passing. Just gone. That's when I started questioning whether I was actually staying fully alert during these drives, because I couldn't trust my own sense of continuity anymore. Even simple things like how long I've been driving started feeling unreliable. When I finally reached the drop-off point that night, I didn't talk to anyone. I just signed the paperwork and left. But I remember sitting in the truck for a long time before leaving the lot, trying to replay the route in my head, and realizing I couldn't account for large parts of it. Not because I was asleep, but because I simply didn't remember them happening. And that was the first time I seriously considered quitting the job. After that night with the missing time, I started doing something I never used to do before. I started checking the clock constantly, not just once in a while, almost every few minutes, because I couldn't trust my sense of time anymore. And that's when things started getting worse, not better. On the next few shifts, I noticed the same pattern repeating again, but not in a way I could easily explain. I would start a route normally, leave the depot, merge onto the highway, everything fine in the beginning. But somewhere along the drive, there would be small breaks in my memory. Not full blackouts, just missing pieces. Like I could remember starting a stretch of road, but not actually driving through it. At first, I thought I was just tired, but then it kept happening. Same feeling, same gaps, and I started noticing something else that made me uncomfortable. It always seemed to happen in the same type of locations. Long, empty stretches, no streetlights, no exits for miles, just straight highway with nothing around. It was like my attention would skip only when there was nothing around to anchor it. I didn't tell anyone about it, because how do you even explain that without sounding like you're imagining things? But internally, I started doing something I never did before. I started marking time manually, writing down approximate times when I felt fully alert, trying to map out the gaps afterward, and what I found didn't make sense. The gaps weren't random, they were too consistent, almost like something was happening at predictable points on the route. One night, I remember very clearly checking the dashboard before entering a long stretch of highway. It was 1:12 a.m. I remember that because I said it out loud. 1:12, okay. Then I drove. The next thing I remember clearly is passing a sign for a fuel station. I checked the clock again. It was 1:29 a.m., 17 minutes. Gone. No memory of it. Just continuity missing. That was the moment I started feeling real anxiety while driving. Not fear of crashing. Fear of not knowing what I was doing during those missing moments. And then something happened that made it worse. On one of the later nights, I started noticing headlights behind me that didn't behave normally. They weren't aggressive or chasing me. They were just there, staying at a distance. Same position for long periods. I would speed up slightly. They would match. I would slow down. They would slow, but never pass. Never fall back, just follow. At first I thought it was another truck on the same route. But after a while, I realized something that unsettled me. It wasn't always the same distance. Sometimes it felt closer when I wasn't looking, and further when I checked directly. That's a strange thing to say, I know, but that's how it felt. Like it wasn't behaving consistently when I observed it directly. I remember one specific moment where I actually pulled over because I couldn't shake the feeling. I got out of the truck and looked back down the highway. Nothing, completely empty road behind me. No headlights, no vehicle, just darkness. So I got back in and continued. And within maybe 5 minutes, the headlights were there again in my mirror. That's when I stopped trying to rationalize it, because I couldn't. Around that point, I started feeling like I was being observed, even when nothing was visible. Like I was part of something that only became noticeable when I paid too much attention to it. I didn't tell dispatch. I didn't report it. because I already knew what the response would be. Nothing, or check fatigue. That was always the answer. But internally, I was starting to reach a point where I wasn't sure if I could continue doing the job. Not because of danger, but because I couldn't reliably tell what parts of the drive I was actually experiencing anymore. And that uncertainty is worse than fear. Because fear, at least, has a clear source. This didn't. After a while, I stopped taking extra shifts. Not officially at first. I just started refusing certain routes, calling in sick, finding excuses. I told myself I needed a break because of fatigue, but the truth is, I didn't feel safe trusting my own memory anymore. What really pushed me to stop completely was one night that I still can't properly explain without sounding inconsistent. It was supposed to be a normal delivery run again. Same type of highway route. Same long stretch through interstate corridors. Nothing unusual on paper. But before I even left the depot, I felt off. Not scared, just uncertain. Like I had already done the same preparation before and couldn't remember the outcome. I remember sitting in the cab for a few minutes before starting the engine, just trying to mentally map the route, like I usually did. But I couldn't hold it in my head properly. It kept slipping. That's when I realized something had changed for me personally. Not the road, me. I started second-guessing, even simple things. Whether I had already checked mirrors. Whether I had already started the engine. Whether I had already spoken to dispatch. It was like my sense of sequence was getting unreliable. I still drove that night. I don't know why. Probably habit. The first hour felt normal again, which almost made me relax. That was the dangerous part. When things feel normal after you've been on edge for too long, you let your guard down. But later into the drive, I noticed something I couldn't ignore anymore. There were parts of the road I didn't remember passing through at all. Not just missing time, but missing awareness of entire stretches. I would see a sign ahead and feel like I had already passed it, even though I couldn't recall doing so. It wasn't like sleep. It was like my attention was being removed and reinserted without me noticing. At one point, I pulled over again. This time I wrote everything down immediately. Time, location, what I remembered, what I didn't. I sat there for maybe 10 to 15 minutes, trying to make sense of it. And then I checked the dash cam. I don't even know why I did that. I guess I wanted proof that my perception was wrong. But what I saw didn't help. There were long sections of footage where the road was visible, the truck was moving. But I had no memory of driving through those exact segments. No reaction. No awareness. Just continuity without recollection. I watched myself driving, but it didn't feel like me remembering it. It felt like observing someone else operating normally while I wasn't present for it. That was the point where I stopped trying to find a logical explanation. Not because I believed anything supernatural was happening, but because I couldn't rely on my own continuity anymore. And without that, nothing else matters on the road. I called dispatch after that shift and told them I was done. They didn't ask questions. Just accepted it. No pushback, no concern. Just understood. That part bothered me more than anything else, because I expected at least some reaction. But there wasn't any. I returned the truck the next morning and left the job completely. For a while after that, I tried to convince myself it was just exhaustion combined with long-distance driving stress. And maybe it was. I still don't fully know. But here's what I can say honestly. I don't drive at night anymore. And I don't trust long empty highways the way I used to. Because even now, sometimes when I think back, there are gaps in what I remember clearly. Not big ones, just enough to make me pause and wonder whether I actually experienced everything in sequence, or whether I was only aware of parts of it.